Actually, the most challenging times have always been around communication. Always. It's always where there's been lack of communication or people having an inability to communicate what they're really feeling. So if you're able to dig into that and enable that communication, that it really is kind of a superpower. I think this comes as a leader, being able to choreograph, curate, mentor, and really lean into those teams, because you need those sparks. You need a little bit of chaos. You need the people who do. You need the stable people, but it's about getting that recipe in the right way. But if you don't do that, if you just always go for the normal and what's safe, you just
You'll get a
lose
safe,
so
normal
much.
result, I guess.
Yeah, you just lose so much. And you know what? It's no fun to work on. Sometimes in the design, architecture, and construction, we're so busy trying to just say, I want this product, that we forget the why and the purpose of the product. So we're trying to leap too quickly to the end game. If you don't take a risk, then that's a risk.
Welcome to the Courageous Leadership Podcast. Jane Clay is a principal and strategy director at Gensler's London office. She is a globally respected workplace strategist with more than 40 years experience, helping organizations rethink how, where, and why they work. Starting out as an interior designer, she moved early into workplace strategy and has since advised clients across the advertising, media, banking, publishing, education, and the private sectors on how to create spaces that genuinely support culture, performance, and well-being. At Gensler, she leads the strategy services, mentors the next generation of talent, and is a powerful, powerful voice on the future of work, gender equality, and the role of design as a catalyst for organizational change. If any of you are in any doubt whatsoever about the role of strategy and why it matters and how it can really influence, genuinely influence the path of your projects, then you need to listen to this episode. I have loved this conversation. Jane and I have met on a number of occasions through events that I've run, and she is a wonderful, wonderful spirit, and I can't wait for you to hear this conversation.
I think everybody needs help sometimes, right? And I think that's one of the first, that's really one of the first signs of a leader in a way, is that you're open to say, I need help, actually. If you're not prepared to be honest, because if you admit you need help, then you also learn something, right?
And your starting point is, I don't have all the answers here, and that's actually a really healthy place to start.
Absolutely, because actually you shouldn't have all the answers necessarily, because if you think you have all the answers, you kind of failed. It's like you're also
or you're
not
thinking just too small. You're just too small.
or you're just in a tiny focus area. It's like I say, my thing is that work isn't actually work. It's lifelong learning, really, isn't it? It's just that you're always, it doesn't matter, you know, and particularly in the field of design or architecture, I think, of course, everything changes. You know, I'm on the strategy side of the business. So it's interesting because I'm a trained, you know, I trained in design per se, but I'm what we call a design strategist. So I work on the strategy side. So I'm always the job before the job. I'm helping the client kind of diagnose often quite ambiguous asks. You know, they kind of don't know what they want. They do know what they want, but they can't decide what they want. So I'm going, you know, helping them navigate and distill a vision. So it's very interesting that when you're in my part of things, or the part that I play in and love, you know, when I'm in my paddling pool as such, and I'm enjoying that splashing around and getting to where things need to be and getting things synchronized and clear and visual, and, you know, and I'm usually drawing all over the walls and trying to make sense of this foggy thing, to distill that vision, to take it forward to a design team. Once you're in the design team, it's just by rote. And they say, all right, I'll take that, and now I'll just deliver that. And there's never any rethinking, re-questioning, back to this idea of the constant learning. Let me unlearn that. Let me unpick. Let me have another look at that vision. Let me just keep that strategy alive. So for me, in the design field or construction or, you know, architecture, whatever it is, there's a process, but that's kind of, we almost speed through it. So I think we lose innovation in a way. I think that, you know, perhaps it's a time when we need to think about the whole process being much more strategic to enable innovation all the way through, in that looking back over my career, I think, and it was one of the things you said, where do you take a leap of faith? And you suddenly go, right, this is the question I need to ask, right? And then you suddenly unleash something that hits the mark. And I think in terms of the process and the way things are done, the fact that it is so linear, and maybe it needs to be process driven in parts to achieve certain things like certain timetables, and you have to get things at a certain time, but thereby you lose that conversation and that spark and that evolving aspect of design, which, comes with the innovation. And I think what happens I find my experience is that people try and condense the strategy part because it's often you get senior people doing that and it's quite expensive and people don't want to spend the money on that. Whereas you could spend.
Also, if you try and expand things too quickly, you're going to blow someone's mind or blow a few people's minds.
Yeah,
and they can't imagine that thing you've described or unleashed.
It's like you need to completely blow it up to repack it. And it's the blowing up and repacking, which is in itself a process, but it's a process of innovation, and it's cathartic and it's psychoanalysis, and it plays to the empathy skills and the human skills and the ability to read between the lines and the things that sometimes in the design, architecture, and construction, we're so busy trying to just say, I want this product, that we forget the why and the purpose of the product. So we're trying to leap too quickly to the end game. And I think that is a problem. And I think, if we have so many tools, back to the point about CAD and all the other things and 3D modeling, and we have so many tools that enable us to visualize it. And maybe it's because I'm old school, but the fact that you had to actually draw on a wall or draw on a piece of paper to take something from your head and bring it to life was itself a process. And sometimes people are very good at that when if you're a good storyteller and you can do a narrative, like the best presenters or speakers, or if you have a really good mentor and they're able to distill for you something in a way that brings it to life and you suddenly go, now I get it. Now I get it. Then that's the same thing.
You've probably seen it more than most in terms of you come in very early days for a client, and maybe a client who's never worked with an architect before or certainly never delivered a project before. And you're coming in when they're feeling a bit vulnerable. They've got some idea of a vision, but they can't articulate it. And you're helping them you're sort of drawing it from them, probably like drawing teeth some days.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then when do you find that because that process is being like this thing about trying to draw something out of them for what they need and want, that then they're so wedded to that they can't allow that to be untangled at any point throughout the process, because now that's a thing and now they've suddenly been able to articulate it and visualize it and now they can't let go of it?
I think sometimes, no, I think if you do it the right way, I mean, I think it's like really, sometimes they know they have sometimes they know they have a challenge, right? Like they've got a lease expiry, they've got to move home, they've got exponential growth. I'm just dropping in some typical things we find. And they have a problem they need to solve for, a challenge to solve for, but they don't know how to go about it. So you start to say, okay, tell me about the challenge. Tell me what aspects of that challenge you need to solve for now. What could you solve for later? What are the cultural issues that go along with that? What are the financial issues that go? So you come at it in the round and you try and just kind of herd all the cats a little bit.
Yeah. So at this point, you're not even talking about design, but all of these things obviously influence the design.
They're all the different aspects of it, right? So you're trying to herd all those design cats and or the design thinking cats. And then you say, okay, now I can see some patterns. So you're trying to almost pattern match. You're looking for the patterns in all of that information to say, if I look at this, objectively, that is an issue. That's not an issue. This is a now issue. That's a later issue. These are the things to solve for now. These are the things to solve for later. This is a cultural issue. This is a financial issue. This is a space issue, whatever. This is a design issue. This is a taste issue. You can start to say what buckets the patterns fall into. Then you can start to say, what's the story around all of those buckets? McCann, the ad agency, is a good example of this. We moved them to 100 Liverpool Street recently, and they were in 4 different buildings across London, and they're like, I know at the time they were like 11 agencies. There's probably 14 of them now, I think, all under one roof. And they all had their own identity, very much their own culture. So they kind of wanted to be together, but they didn't want to be together, right? So they all wanted to have their own thing because they'd all kind of created their own subcultures. And, that was really important to the people. And they're an ad agency. So they're kind of at the top of their own game about telling stories, right? When you go and pitch to them, you think, oh, this is going to be tough because everybody's going to be pitching at the top level. We knew the strategy was important because we knew that moving everybody to one home and moving them to Liverpool Street wasn't going to be popular because that's not known to be ad agency land. Liverpool Street was considered lawyer land, or, Royal Bank of Scotland. That was the space they were going into, the old Royal Bank of Scotland space. So we knew we had it cut out for us. But again, it's like, it's that thing that you start to talk to them about what are your challenges. So is it culture? Is it that basically you've got to put all of these rowdy teenagers who have a very strong point of view into a new home, but you have to give every teenager their own door behind which they can make whatever mess they want? That was effectively it. So, we kind of came up with the concept ultimately of, it was the Royal Tannenbaums meet Sir John Soane. So it's like you have the eclecticness of Sir John Soane, of, all these collections of different things, different clients, the different people you're working for, but then the madness of the family who were all so random and different.
All kooky in their own way.
Kooky, right? So that became the kind of ethos of the design, but we couldn't have got to that if we hadn't unpicked all of it. And we actually we said for this one, we need to have the strategy and design sit side by side and the change management. So my team and the design team sat together and we said, how can we work this through that we'll actually get the agencies to elect representatives, each agency elected representatives. We got them into our office, away from their own office. And we got them doing sessions, like we sent them on a treasure hunt around Liverpool Street, and we split them. This team goes this side, this team goes this side, this team goes this. And we said, you go and find the best pub, go and find the best sandwich shop, take photos, do this. We gave them things to do, right? To say, and that was basically change management. Go and explore the area, come back.
Discover things that you like.
Stories,
even if you think you're not going to find anything.
Come back with your stories, share them. Sell the stories, right? So ad agency style. Then we said, okay, describe your team as a person. So we had all sorts of people. One person was saying, my team's the yoga instructor. We're really into Zen. And then we had an illustrator drawing them all. And then that's how we came up with the characters for the family. So by doing that process, which was like an intensive 3 to 4 day process, they saw themselves in the process. They believed in the process because they were so embedded in it, and they knew we'd heard them, right? Yeah. So we listening, and we had all sorts of fun with other little exercises and things you do. But by the time we came to saying, how did those patterns match into something that's meaningful conceptually? And what matters to you is to be under one roof, but have the ability to have your own teenage door, right? As a family.
And that's probably going to shift over the next few years as well.
Exactly.
So, uber flexibility there.
And we have to be uber flexible about it. So how do we do that in a modern way? So we'll use technology. Instead of giving you your own branding wall, we'll do it via digital, right? We'll have digital walls you can brand when your client comes in. Like we set a stage on every floor. That stage you can set any way you want. It's like there was no customization, but everybody felt that they could in a different layered way. And it was very successful in the sense that people got round to understanding that the building could be more than just an old Royal Bank of Scotland building, that Liverpool Street had some alternative funkiness to it because they'd explored it, that actually they'd all bought into the concept, that there were even secret rooms in the office that, were just full of plants and sofas. But it was a secret room, it wasn't advertised, but you had to go and discover it. And they were all very much involved in the kind of design and selection. So it was very, very inclusive. Many design projects are, but because it had been inclusive from the absolute strategy outset, even though, of course, we'd had like vision sessions with the head of the agencies, but even they were very open to making sure that they selected who would be right for the teams. So sometimes you have to kind of be so open, back to this thing about being open and to learn from them and not project that this is the end product. They made the product.
I'm curious to know, given that you're working with an ad agency, did you have to sort of up your game in terms of how you communicated the ideas back? Like you've done, I can see all this listening and strategy, but now how you play that back, because they're going to be like, well, hang on, just did you get my,
no,
how well did you listen? And
yeah, we did. I think in terms of a lot of the focus on the craft, we actually had them come into our office. As I said, when we did the sessions, they came into our office, but actually the client themselves came in and we had like the kitchen table sessions where the mess was in our office. We were actually in our decant space, not in our new office. So we had these big IKEA kitchen tables, which literally, and all the finishes and everything. And we made the mess in the office. So it was all very immersive, messy, but also very much about craft. So they got that, the way they work is they pin everything up on walls. It's all draft sets of ads and everything. It's very touchy-feely. It's not all glossy. So they wanted that same frame of reference. So it was actually very married in terms of twinned up process. So it worked very well. Funnily enough, they were going to move in just before COVID hit, of course.
Oh, gosh.
So then COVID hit. And they were all from home. But actually, when they moved in just after COVID, I think they were so flexible. And because they'd obviously gone hybrid, they were able to kind of sublet a floor. The thing was so flexible, but they've just ramped up again. But it's still incredible. We won at Mixology Awards. So it's been a very successful project, actually. But that was another one of those where you had to think differently.
But again, like you're saying there, the whole process was designed. I mean, there was no way you were going to fail if you've thought that much about the process, right? And this is what I'm all very much about in my book and in my courses and everything. It's like if you set yourself up in a way that you understand the process and just don't think, okay, I'm a creative, I should just go with whatever mood I'm in. No, I mean, it's not. It's much more than that, and leadership plays such a key role in this.
It does. I think that's the thing, is you can't assume I'm doing this like, hey, it's an ad agency. I'm going to, this is the product I'm going to create. What's the character and the personality of that organization, right? Who are the kind of people who work for them? How do I get the best possible result? Let me get under the skin. Let me match up. Let me think about the team I put together to work with them. Profile. You got to be like a CIA profile.
Yes, exactly.
Let me profile the team. Let me get the right mix. Let me crowdsource my team for ideas. It's not about leadership ideas. It's about saying, this is a different way we need to approach this. And we need to think that we've got to really up our game in terms of creativity. We've got to match them like for like, look them in the eyeballs, play it that way. And then basically the design is theirs.
Yeah,
We've
it
just
will just
made it
emerge
happen.
from that really solid process. Yeah.
And then you don't have to and they were going from, one owned desks and offices to open plan and unassigned and a different way of working and not a desk for everybody. And so they'd made a huge leap. This was before COVID, of course. So they'd made a huge leap, but that it didn't matter. It was intuitive to them because they'd gone through that journey. And, you don't get that with every project, but also if you only focus on if you're saying it's a law firm and it will be this, and if you just always go by the process and you always go by rote and you don't spend enough time in that diagnostic or that early thinking about, I don't have to do this the normal way. Always got to unlearn the ways we normally do things, because sometimes if you don't take a risk, then that's a risk.
So in your world of strategy, I can imagine that some days you're in a meeting and everyone's just talking the talk, and you throw a grenade on the table, very politely, I'm sure. But, do you find that you're constantly that person who's just thinking a little bit differently to the rest of the room?
I think it does go with the territory, because it's what I said earlier, is you look for patterns, right? So you're wired for pattern matching in a way, because that's an intrinsic part of the strategy brain, I guess, because you skim. It's like speed reading. When you read a book, and I am a speed reader, funnily enough, you're able to read a whole book in a day or half a day, but you're taking every other word, and that enables you to make the pattern of the story. So it's the same when you're in a room and you hear people talking, you're able to pick that, hold on a minute, they're talking about this, they're talking about those two things are in contradiction, but that person just said this. And that actually means that neither of those things matter. So you're constantly in, it's it's kind of constant choreography, if I can explain it that way, that your brain does do that. Now, sometimes you have to manage it and say, can I just, that is contradictory. Can I challenge you there? Do you not mean then that? Sometimes you have to play that game to get them to come together around a vision or to gain consensus. But sometimes you have to listen, to sit back and then come back with the diagnostic for them. So it depends what the challenge is in the room.
Can I, in case there's somebody listening who knows they're wired this way, but they're not necessarily in a position to be able to say, just hang on a minute, this is what I'm hearing, because they don't feel like they've got the mandate to say that just yet.
I think, when you, it's the funny thing, if you've ever had that thing when you know that, it's a bit like when you're in class and you want to put your hand up, that feeling that just like, it's right there.
Yeah.
You just know you want to say something, but you're a little bit, I think when you're younger, you're a little bit scared of saying the wrong thing. But
Yeah.
more often than not, and maybe this is a female thing, I think sometimes it is, instinctively, women think twice. And
Or 3 or 4
also,
times.
yeah, but also we have, I think our instincts are also stronger, and we have more empathy. So we've kind of filtered in a different way um, before we say something. So generally, we're more often than not, right. When we say something, I would say that, wouldn't I? But I think that if you have that feeling, it's actually, you should be saying, could I just ask a question? So you can go about it that way. It's very polite. You just do it the diplomatic way. Could I just ask a question? When you said that, it struck me that this other person said that. Do you not feel that that's contradictory? It's about how you say it, right? You can still say it without being confrontational. And the trick is to do it sometimes without being, if you're not some men will go in and they'll be confrontational and they'll drop a bomb in the middle, right? Because that looks good, right? But actually, I think there's more power in just slowly digging in sometimes. Sometimes you want to be confrontational and drop a bomb, but I don't find that often works, and it often depends on the room you're with. So my advice to anybody who feels like they don't necessarily have the confidence, or they're just starting and they're wired that way, is it's okay to play a slow game with that. But if you feel that burgeoning, I'm sensing I really want to say something, say it. Just, you can say it slowly. You can say, could I just ask a question on that? It's a simple way as an in, if that answers the question.
It does. And, I do feel like there's been times that I've been in that situation, and sometimes it's been met with, geez, you're brave, or, well done, or, but that's a good point, but we can't deal with that right now. But I guess my other thoughts is that if there's a couple of people in that room, that maybe it's a conversation with them afterwards, if you don't feel confident in that group forum situation that you're in, because sometimes the energy is going in a certain direction, and if you want to slow things down or whatever, it just sort of grinds on the momentum in the room, or if it's just something that if you haven't spoken up until that point, and then you speak up with a bit of a challenge, then that's also seen as.
Yeah, I think you have to decide, it has to be the right part of the conversation, because there are many things that come up if it's going to deviate. And again, you have to be sensitive to the conversation at large. If you've missed your point to speak up, there's no point in speaking up. If it's relevant at the time, you can't save a point and then suddenly come in half an hour afterwards and expect people to go back to it, right? You have to choose your moment. But also, you're absolutely right. There are times when what you bring up may need to be a different conversation with two other people in the room. Again, it depends on the room, it depends on the conversation, and it depends on where the conversation is heading at that moment in time. You know, there are times when your role is purely to pull those conversation strands together and get to the nux or do that pattern matching. There are times when your role is to listen and watch and be behind the scenes pulling those patterns together, in which case you might be coming back to a select 2 or 3 senior people in that room later and saying, this is what I found and this is what we need to challenge, right? So it depends on what you've been brought into that room to do as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. I'd love to dive into, I mean, you've told one story there, which is very fascinating, but I'd love to know about a particular challenge, like a really challenging moment for you where you really had to just step above and beyond, completely outside of your comfort zone. And clearly I can see your comfort zone is probably wider than most, which is great. And this is exactly why I'm talking to you.
It's funny. I mean, there's many times your comfort zone gets tested. I can think of probably earlier in my career, actually. There were a couple of times, and it's quite often, and again on the strategy side, it's more about how I've been faced with a difficult situation, and I think this comes back down to having to turn on a dime. A colleague and I went in to run a workshop, very traditional. We were trying to get them to go open plan on assigned working. You know, we were doing the strategy, coming up with some great stuff, having all these conversations. And of course, it was a room full of men. They literally all came into the room and they'd obviously decided this all beforehand. They all came into the room and they all sat back in their chairs and put their feet on the table and crossed their legs at the ankle and sat back and just went like this.
Oh my goodness.
And it was like, you know, we were kind of in our mid-30s going, what do we do now? You know, it's like very sexist kind of behavior. We realized that this workshop wasn't going to happen. So I just said, okay, I can sense, you know, you just had to then go into, I can sense that, you know, there's some reluctance to be at this session. Can we just have an open conversation about what the problem is?
Well, that's a very gutsy way to open the session, though, isn't it?
But you have to. What are you going to do? Because it's obvious, right? So if you, it's the classic thing is like, there's obviously a problem. Let's talk about the problem, basically. And what came out of it, ultimately, it turned into a therapy session. They all felt very hard done by. They'd all been forced to come by their boss. They didn't want to lose their, you know, it was just the usual stuff. But they'd all then gang together like little boys and decided they were going to do this thing because they knew it was 2 women and it was going to put 2. And they all apologized afterwards. It was so fun. They all apologized for being horribly rude. But, you know, what they needed, and we got on with the job. I'm not sure if they ever actually implemented. But after that, the process was very open and clear. But you had to kind of say, obviously, there's a problem. And I'm very sorry you feel that way. But we both felt awful. We felt really challenged. It was really quite aggressive, but you had to kind of put that down and say, obviously, this isn't going to, let's just not do this. Let's just have a conversation. And there was another very similar one. I was working with the BBC down at White City, and it was with BBC TV Entertainment. And I remember it was a funny one. It was very similar, actually. And we walked in, and it was with all of the producers of some of the quite high, it was some of the popular TV shows at the time, actually. But they had, of all things, they came into the room with vibrating lightsabers, basically like giant vibrators. And they put them on the table. And of course, there was much merriment in the room. They obviously weren't taking it seriously because, again, they were very anti moving into any sort of a different environment. You often get this at the strategy end of things. People are very anti. It's the kind of resistance to change or alternative ways of thinking. So what you then have to do again is say, obviously, we're not going to be doing the work we're doing. You have to, in a nanosecond, think, what can I do instead? So again, having learnt from the last one with the bank guys, I said, okay, let's have a conversation. There was a whiteboard there, and I'll say, let's have a conversation about what you thought you were coming here for and what I'm going to tell you you're coming here. So I was a bit more forceful this time. So we went through a whole point about what they thought they were coming here, which was all negative. And then I told them what they were actually coming here for. And they went, oh, we didn't realize that was what we were coming here for. I said, okay, so now you know that. Can we work through the workshop? And then it worked. But it's interesting that sometimes if people don't have information, they can be very aggressive. It's that resistance thing. So that was another variation on a theme. But interestingly, most of the times that I've had issues like that have been related to encounters with groups of people where they haven't been well informed about a process they're about to go through.
And is that something that you maybe share with your future clients in terms of, how much of this, what we're talking about, has been communicated with your key personnel or even further than that? Yeah, because you can say, look, I've had experiences where we basically have to stop the process because of this, and this is important that we get buy-in, and and then I guess you can offer to help, like I can help you with that if that's
could help with communications.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, it's something, if you get a request for proposal in and, people say, oh, we're going to be moving 2,000 people. We've got a lease break. We're going to move these people to a new building. We're going to do new ways of working. We're going to, and, one of the first questions you ask when they say, submit your queries, one of the first questions you ask is, how much do people know about the move?
Yeah.
Have they been informed? Do they know that you are going out to, so you ask those questions because that tells you, A, how much time you have to spend communicating, B, how much you might have to be having additional focus groups and conversations, how much time you might have to spend in town halls, how much time you might have to spend on frequently asked questions sessions. So it gives you a clue. It's one of the war wounds that you learn from is that communication actually, and I guess that's one of the biggest lessons throughout my career, is that communication is everything.
And assumptions, like you go in and you think, oh, surely everyone's on the same page here because we've been working together for 6 months or whatever. But it's surprising, isn't it, that even if you've been working with the same team for 6 months, assumptions are so different.
Yeah.
Across the table.
No, and again, I think that's one of the things is, we often have, it's like I say, when you have the project kickoff session, that is one of the things. It's like, it's almost like a mini visioning session. You kind of have to say, what do you think today's about? What are your assumptions? What do you believe the job is about? What do you think the purpose of this team is? Because people have a different view of what their purpose or the purpose of that project team is. So you all have to be on the same page at least to understand, kind of, this is what I'm saying on my t-shirt. Have we all got the same thing on our t-shirt? Is it just a variation on a theme and are we okay? Or have we got completely different things we're saying? Because, then the project's going to fragment and go in different directions. So this is why I come back to the point which I made earlier, is that in a way, the strategy side of a project doesn't ever go away. That needs curating because there always has to be that element. And if you only go by rote and say, right, that's done. Now we do this, then we do that, then we just deliver. You miss things along the way, that curation. And it's not necessarily just something a project manager can do because there's a subtlety to that can sometimes get lost.
Do you have to fight to stay involved in a project?
Yes, quite often you do, partly because there's a perception that, people who do strategy or consulting are expensive. Usually, yes, because they're more senior. Usually, yes, because they're more experienced. And usually, yes, because they could do a bit of everything. They're normally either architects or designers or psychologists or something else, or change managers or a bit of everything. So they're able to do that curation role and guide a team. So it's kind of a different, there's a project manager and then you might also have your own design manager on a project, but it's almost like a strategy manager, I'd say, which is a kind of a key role. It's also not just a client relationship manager. Also, the strategy people are often the people who've built the first really trusted relationship as an advisor to a client. You know the ins and outs and what they're worried about, and you've unpacked a lot of the hopes and fears at the beginning. So there's a trust there that you build. You need to hand that over to people you trust on the design side, but also if the design team are sensible, they don't lose you out of that team. You know what I mean? Because it's a
Totally, because
benefit.
especially if a project goes on for a number of years, it's so easy to just be taken by the wind on certain directions, and before you know it, you turn around and hang on a minute, what was our vision again?
Yeah,
Where's
yeah,
our
no,
strategy
totally.
gone? Can we find it in what we're doing right now?
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, it is interesting. So I would say, just looking back, it just made me think that actually the most challenging times have always been around communication. Always. It's always been where there's been lack of communication or people having an inability to communicate what they're really feeling. So if you're able to dig into that and enable that communication, then you have that. It really is kind of a superpower, I think.
Exactly. And this is what I found when I researched for my book as well, that communication is the number one failure or the reason why projects fail. And because it's on so many levels, it's the communication from the client to the team. It's from the team to the client. It's from the stakeholders to the team to the client. And it's throughout like the longevity of a project as well, because you might have some very strong communication in certain phases of a project, but it needs to be continuous. And this is where the strategy and the vision can just tie it all together. You've got something to hang it on.
Absolutely.
You've got
Yeah,
something to hang it on. Otherwise, it's just words. Otherwise, it's just a design concept that suddenly gets
totally.
diluted down to something that it's unrecognizable at the end. And I
Totally.
know that you're similar and that it's very difficult to have conversations with clients about the value of a vision and a strategy. But if you think about it alone, just being the value of hanging the communication across the entire project, that is something priceless, isn't it?
But it's also, it's very interesting. I mean, another project we did was Microsoft Ireland. We went all out to get it. We profiled the team, profiled the design team. It was kind of like going on Tinder. This person's just right. So, it's like your matchmaking, right?
Yeah.
So we did the profiling internally. We were working at it internally, my team and the design team. We got it right. And we talked to the client, introduced the client slowly to the team. Everything worked. And the client said, we want something very different. That they're moving from a few buildings into a new building, the first owned building of that Microsoft ever had that they owned and didn't lease in EMEA. It was going to be their European hub, 300,000 square feet, over 2,000 people. It's going to have a massive atrium. And they said, it can't just be an atrium. We need a surprise. It's got to be something different. And we
Well, this is
kind
an
of
architect's dream, though, isn't it? A brief like this. I
absolutely
want it to be
right.
different, and I
It's got to
want
be
a
different. So we're like,
surprise. And
that's like so big. And we went in and, we created at the pitch this thing. And, we kind of built this massive box in the atrium and we did all this thing. But it wasn't actually the design that did it. It was how we spoke about it. So we went in with the design team and a lady called Amanda, who was our designer. I mean, she's absolutely brilliant, but she's one of these people that has a vision that's so out there, that sometimes people don't get it. She was an amazing designer. And she came up with this design for this amazing box that did everything and the floors and, that kind of won them over. But we also were talking about smell and sound, which people weren't talking about then. And we won the job, but almost as soon as we'd won the job, they said, right, well, we don't like that, but we loved you.
Oh,
So now
interesting.
redesign it. And then
Oh,
we went away and we actually completely rethought the building, and we rethought the building based on landscape principles. And we said, okay, if we think about Ireland and we think about the landscape of Ireland, and then we basically took the shape of the building and we transposed it onto a map of Ireland. And we thought about ley lines and desire paths, and we actually conceived of the whole of the interior of the building. We didn't build, it was really odd. We actually built the circulation. Normally you wouldn't build the circulation, right? But we built the circulation and conceived of it as a trail through the center of the building. And we built focus rooms and pods off that. And everything else was open to the window. So it was conceived as a total landscape. And we literally built a mountain, and we literally built a digital waterfall. And that digital glass waterfall went into a digital lake at the bottom. And it was the most amazing project because the client said to us, we love you, but we don't like that. So we knew that we had to up our game in terms of design, but we also knew that the client had total confidence in us to do that. So, when you have that from a client,
But also, could they articulate what they didn't like about the first scheme?
No, they just said it's
No, yeah,
great, but we want more.
okay.
It's like they
Which I
didn't.
guess is half the thing is like you need to sense like really what is the ambition of of a
Yeah,
client, because
yeah,
you get mixed messages, but that's
yeah.
a very clear
We
ambition.
want
Yeah.
more, and it was like it needs to be rooted in the local culture. It needs to have local relevance. They were kind of thinking about their guidelines at the same time, and they were saying there are some things we want this or we want that, just a few little things. And actually, I think as a result, what was lovely, we had this whole narrative, and we said the building is like an island. It's a bit of a pun. The building is like an island. When you come there, people landed at the base of the mountain near the lake, and they lit a torch for the people that would follow. And it was like, this is how you came to reception. We had a whole narrative about the building and how you followed the trail and the paths through the building. And when we went to see the building, and when it on opening day, but they opened it and they had staff going around the building using our narrative
Oh,
to tell
I
the
love it, love it,
story
love it.
of the building. And this guy was telling us the story, and we were just beaming from ear to ear because they were using our story about the island. And this is how you arrive at the island. And, you know, you leave a torch for others and the others that will arrive. And the whole building was based on that. And stunning. Projects like that happen so few and far between, but every decision we made on that project from a design perspective was put through the filter of that vision of the island. Is this what people would do on that island? Is this true to the vision of the island? Is this true to that landscape? Would you do that in that space? So when you have a very strong vision and it carries through back to the idea of the thread throughout the design and the build, it becomes your lens through which every decision.
It makes decision making easier. It makes communication easier. I mean, you could just go on and on, couldn't you?
Yeah.
So why don't people understand it? Why do you and I understand it, but nobody else?
I don't know. I don't know. It's because we're special. No, I mean it's just like I think you have to have a passion for it. You have to have that passion for stories. And you have to understand the power of a story related to design. I think too often, and again, I think this comes back to what we said at the beginning, when there's a process and too much emphasis is put on a process and a time frame and that agenda, that it's
And
very
being
linear
and efficient. Yeah.
very linear, it's a deliverable, it's this and it's that, then you lose the subtlety and the richness and the evocative aspects of design because people are too busy delivering something that's totemic in a different way. It's not, it's totemic without spirit, or you know what I mean? Whereas if you come the other way, what you deliver, it's a different way to get a result that has much more meaning and longevity and soul, I guess. So I think that that's why I say, I think back to your original question, that is the process the thing that gets in the way, perhaps, that does that need to change? And I think yes, it does need to change, somehow needs to open up to allow for an expansion of that vision or that strategic thinking, or those points where you can think and go back to the roots of things instead of getting lost in process constantly. Because it's a creative process, right? Why does it become so linear so soon?
Yeah, I mean, when contractors get involved potentially too early.
I know. Yeah. Well, there is that. And I get, there is a practical side to it for sure, but
There is. And this is what I was just about to say, because obviously you don't want to create a vision that no one can deliver,
of
and that the
course.
market says, oh, I can do something like that. I don't, I can do, like, it'll be broadly like
Yeah.
that. So,
Yeah.
but I'll just probably trim off all the nice bits and get it down to its bare bones, and then that'll
Yeah.
be good enough, right?
Yeah. No, totally. But it is exciting. I mean, I don't know. I think we're at a point where the design, there's so much potential and there's so much change. Technology won't take over everything, but because you can't replace the human brain, and you can't replace the chaos that is the human brain. And out of that chaos comes so much creativity and innovation. And that's the unique thing about the very best designers and thinkers, is you need that little chaos. It's so wonderful. It's that little the fault in the machine or whatever you want to call it. It's that brings that special, and it's okay to have that. And I sometimes say to designers, you know what, it's great to have a personality and be a little bit quirky, because that makes you different. It makes you stand out, and actually whatever you deliver will always have that bit of personality to it as well.
This is why I'm so on about the fact that if we could develop more courageous leaders who are willing to have people in their teams, like you're doing that profiling piece, that aren't aligned to you, that are going to challenge you as a leader, who are going to bring some spark, but with the spark comes some challenges in terms of the team dynamics and other things. So it requires leaders to just kind of embrace that, know that the long-term benefits are there, but there's some things to manage, because chaos is good, but if you have complete chaos for years on end, like, that's exhausting.
You can't. You have to. This comes back to the curation, and I think this comes as a leader, being able to choreograph, curate, mentor, and really lean into those teams, because you need those sparks. You need a little bit of chaos. You need the people who do. You need the stable people, but it's about getting that recipe in the right way. You know what I mean? But if you don't do that, if you just always go for the normal and what's safe, you'll
get a safe, normal result, I guess.
Yeah, you just lose so much. And you know what? It's no fun to work on, is it?
No.
I mean, it's just not the same. It's and the sense of achievement the joy you get from seeing a team see what they've produced through that as well is incredible. It's all fun.
It is all fun. So I've honestly loved this conversation. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. It was a joy.
This podcast is brought to you by the Courageous Leaders app. This app is designed to get you to lead with clarity, be highly valued, and build your impact. It's for leaders who've outgrown the way things have always been done, for next-gen leaders who know that there is a more effective, more courageous way to lead. And they just need a framework, and they need the tools and the tips and the strategies from somebody who has been through it and somebody who has researched leaders who have done big, bold, courageous things. And why is this different? This gives you tangible tools and strategies that you can apply immediately, no matter what stage of the project you are on, or what sector, what scale. It feels as though you've got an expert leader in your corner, and you can make this fit your schedule. I've had very busy leaders go through my program, and they're amazed that they had time to do it, and the actions and the things that changed around them as a result. So I can't wait for you to check it out for yourself.